October Film Haunt. It is out.
It
It's out in
is
the world.
almost 3 weeks somehow. It feels like 3 years and 3 minutes.
I mean, you probably been trying to promote the pre-orders and launch forever, I assume.
Yeah, I remember they did the cover reveal back in I think January, which was felt so early coming from a small press type of experience in my past. And so 8 plus months talking about this
Yeah.
book.
It's a really long time.
Okay, like I'll try not to make people sick of it, but remind them that it exists. At this, try to find that balance.
Yeah. I mean, I do try and do 3 months for my books, and that seems like forever. 3 months
Yeah,
of like promoting, and then you're like, I can't imagine most of a year. Um, I love the book. Is It's great. Really, really harrowing. Really did it got it sunk its claws into me.
thank
There's a word that pops out as I was reading that made me, and I don't know if this will make sense. Uh, this book feels polyrhythmic. I don't know if that makes any kind of sense. Do you know the band Meshuggah?
I know of them.
Okay, they're a metal band, but they have very complicated polyrhythmic music that it's in like weird time signatures, and it's still very groovy. But the beats never this both the form of it because it is split in multiple perspectives, and there is interludes with found media of many different kinds, which I have lots of questions for you about. But it's that is part of it, but it's also like the prose feels there's so many feints. There's so much feints as in feint. Like there's these lots of sensory feints, a lot of moments of questioning reality and the perspective characters thinking they're seeing the pine arch creature, and maybe they are, maybe they're not. So it feels like it's constantly keeping you on guard, and constantly you're like, I don't know. It feels like it's like I felt if I don't know, that's just jumped out of my head. It felt polyrhythmic, and that's a compliment. I really enjoyed it. It has it. I've been reading lots of books for this podcast over and over for all these different guests, and it is incredibly unique. I haven't read anything that has that same feel to it.
Well, thank
Um,
you.
uh, I don't know. Did you have a sense of that when you were writing it? And like, I think it ties into the form because I'm sure you were. How much of the writing was you figuring out the form of it with those interludes with the different perspectives?
Well, I started off from a place where I was seriously considering writing just a fully found footage novel. And it is something I want to do one day because I'm just really fascinated with the challenge of it. Because some people listening to this might know that the novel's origin is in a short story called October Film Hunt Under the House, which was in my first story collection way back in 2016 called Greener Pastures. And that story was entirely found footage. It was basically, a found journal and some blog posts mixed into it. And then there was actually some like video transcripts too. But anyway, everything was epistolary. And I started off with a desire to write a full length novel in that sort of framework, and pretty early on abandoned it because it has as many strengths as found footage and epistolary storytelling has. There are also a lot of limitations. You can't tap into well, you can tap into an emotional arc of a person, but you're very limited because you're only an observer. So I had thought about that and I was like, no, I'm going to do a traditional narrative. That's really the right thing for me to do here. And then, lots of books nowadays intersperse narratives with, blog posts, journal entries, video transcripts, whatever the case may be. and I just decided I would just have some fun with that, and that would be my compromise with myself. And I also don't think found footage would have worked ultimately because the book is about a movie,
Right.
and to tell the story like a movie when it's about another movie, it would be too much like a hall of mirrors. And so started, planning it out and deciding how I would structure everything. And you mentioned polyrhythmic, and no one else has brought up that kind of concept, but I think it's really interesting because I kept thinking of it as two novels about, two protagonists sort of who are both drawn into this film in extremely different ways. And that would be Jory, who if I had to label someone the protagonist, it would definitely be her. But then there's also Coleman, who serves as a sort of secondary protagonist. So they each have their novels. They're in different parts of the country, and they just start drifting toward each other like continents, and little tendrils are coming off and connecting the two of them, and they're on this collision course. And then you have a few other more minor POBs in the book as well. And that, and then you have the interstitial epistolary type segments, which are pretty much all very short. And so, yeah, I was working with several rhythms and meshing them together and just trying to keep it in mind all the time because in a way, it kind of became a complex machine that I had to keep track of. And it's also my first novel. So I was, kind of being challenged by the fact that I had never really done this before. Um, I had written a practice novel years ago, but sort of could count that, but I'm not going to count it for this part of the talk. So yeah, it was really interesting, and I guess another big thing that comes into play when we're talking about this subject is I had come from a short story background, and in a short story, you can be very atmospheric, you can be experimental, you can do basically whatever you want to. There are very few rules as long as, you grab the reader's interest and hold it for a short time and then finish off with something that, whether it's satisfactory or not, it feels earned.
Right.
You don't have to have a real ending if you don't want to. It just has to feel like it's the right conclusion. Um, So I come from this mindset where I can experiment, I can play around, I can try new things. And I wanted to bring that to the act of writing a novel, even though some might say you're not supposed to because it's a completely different beast and you have to follow all these strict guidelines and you have to hit your story beats at roughly the same point every time. And so I was having a lot of fun playing with that too, and just I love using atmosphere, and I love writing that in and of itself is infected with horror. Not just the plot, but the words being used have their own horror in them, their own suspense, their own creepiness, their own all that great stuff. And then the third thing I would say, the third rhythm would be that I really wanted this book to not only examine the line between reality and fiction, 'cause that's pretty obviously a big theme of the book, but I not only wanted to examine that, I wanted the book to sort of feel like that. I wanted, those two things to be mirroring each other at all times if I could do that. And so you often do have moments where characters think they see something, maybe they do, maybe they don't, as you phrased it. Um, Two characters' stories briefly touch each other and then pull back apart, and like, the narrative styles might overlap a little bit for a moment. It's just some of these things are instinctual, some of them are more deliberate, and it was just I could probably list 100 different things I learned writing this book, and it was a lot of fun just to play around with the rhythms, so to speak.
I mean, I the it's very effective, and like especially the it is a constant question of reality. It is like a constant challenge to you to. I mean, I try and go into most books mostly blind. Like I know like the basic premise, but I try not to have any kind of expectations. And it really does challenge as you're reading the book. You're like, jumping between perspective characters, and then you have Trevor, who I follow on Instagram, and I was like, oh wait, this is I follow Trevor. He's an incredible artist, but I was just like, oh, he's a real guy. I'm like, yeah, I know this. Which again, it's blending. It's this blending. I'm like, how much? So that makes me go, well, I interviewed John Langan I don't know, a month ago or so, and he also had lots of found footage stuff in his newest collection, and we talked about a little bit about found footage of that. And I'm like, and then reading your full length novel where you kind of play with all these different things. I don't know. I always am very excited about different form and people challenging what can and cannot be in a novel versus being in a short story versus whatever about what is acceptable and all that. I'd rather have something that is it's a novel. It should be novel, which is another way I was going to say like it is novel. It feels, it feels new, which is what I want. I don't want the same thing all over and over and over again. Um and I was also going to say like the it feels like a panopticon. The because of I think because of the presence of all the cameras in it, because of the presence of the social media posts. And I was going to say that this also feels, I don't know. There's lots of people who try and capture the feeling of social media, and I don't think they do a very good job a lot of the time. It doesn't feel like social media to me, which it feels oppressive. Which I don't know if that's about me or not. But your this book captures, I think, accurately modern social media, and like you use the phrase, the post-truth world we live in. Um, I forget. I bring up my document. Um, is that was that was that in there from the beginning? Was that baked in? Like we're gonna because of the fact like like we were talking about the launch period for your book, and they kind of soft launch a movie in your book. Was that kind of baked in the social media aspect of all of it?
Yeah, I knew it was going to have to be there because I wanted to basically create a modern urban legend, a modern folklore, and that there's no way that could work without the internet and without social media because that's where people would go to learn about it. That's where people would go to spread promotion about it. Um, so I knew it was going to play a big role, and it's something that something like Slender Man, which was basically born on Reddit. It's
Yeah.
like that's that's like a fertile soil for this kind of thing. So I knew I wanted to incorporate Reddit as well. And so I've always enjoyed, going back to found footage again for just a second, like I've always enjoyed epistolary anything. When I was a kid, I liked reading that type of thing. Dracula was one of my first horror books that I fell in love with. Um, you know, Bram Stoker wrote Dracula today, it would be heavily on the internet. There would be social media posts all over it from various platforms, and there would be Reddit threads and little pop culture magazine articles and things like that. So I just wanted to really try hard to capture the essence of it, and the theme of belief and the responsibility of belief, and can the concept of belief itself change if if it spreads widely enough, if it's powerful enough, can it kind of snowball and start to gain a sort of occult power? Um, that everything kept bringing me back to social media. So it's the only way something like the premise of this book could possibly happen. Like it could only happen in today's world. And then, we are so divided and no one knows what's true anymore. I'm very glad I wrote this book before AI started sledgehammering us every single day, all day,
Yeah.
because I would have pulled my hair out and I was like, can I even write this book? 'Cause, like, it's just AI is pretty sickening and inundating, and it's just, but I think I got this book just under the line of the end of the pre-AI era, because who knows what's gonna happen now, like, what we believe, what we don't believe, and most importantly, what we want to believe and choose to believe, because that's the big problem nowadays, is it's not just about what's true, it's about what you want to be true, and I really wanted to look at that. And again, just to circle back, impossible without social media, so
Yeah. I mean, there's a quote you have from a character I won't spoil because it happens a little bit into the book, but about the question of they say he has been in cults, they create nothing. And I really, that was like, I don't know, I highlight a million little quotes as I'm going through the books, and I have a million of them. I really like. Again, the prose is really good, but it's that I wrote down. I was like, creation, and like that is again a big theme of the book, because again they are, like you say, creating a religion, creating a god, creating a supernatural entity, however you want to frame it. Um, and I wrote down the question: art is occultism, and like is the it, let's see, is a film which starts everything in the story, and so we create art, and art creates gods.
you can certainly look at it that way. I think the more overt way the book would put it is fandom can be occultism,
Okay.
like the love of art, the appreciation of art. But then, the other side of that coin is the art itself, because the creator and the I don't really like to use the word fan, but the creator and the appreciator are kind of have a symbiotic relationship. One can't exist without the other in a vacuum. So in that sort of sense, someone who appreciates art is kind of an artist themselves, because they're implementing their own aesthetics, they're implementing their own perception of the world and their own mindset and their own beliefs, and that can change the art.
Yeah.
So together, can these two elements, the artist and the appreciator, can they implement an occult sort of process and actually change reality itself? And in a world where belief is just whatever you want it to be, apparently, that opens the door to some pretty wild stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it is the age old, like, once you are finished with making something, if I write a book and I let it out into the world, it's not mine anymore. It's the people, whoever reads it, it's your, and sometimes people go, what does this mean? I'm like, I don't know. Is it on the page? Then I don't, then you decide. You tell me. It's your interpretation is just as valid. If it's subtext, then if it's not textual, then whatever's out there, it can be just as valid, especially like when you come up with like fan theories about, you know, pop culture in general. A lot of them become so big that they become just widely accepted canon, even though they're not necessarily ever textual. It's never the quote unquote truth in that art, but the
Right.
people's belief in it, coming back around to it. I'm going to dance around spoilers with this question. and this is more of a mechanical question about mystery. Um, like your book certainly has plenty of mystery in it. It is lots of, and it's not like it's not inherent like, oh, who did it, but it is more about what is this, where is it coming from, why are these things happening, which, I don't know, there's inherent mystery, I think, in most good fiction. It's not like, you craft, you want people to know what's going to happen next, you want to know what's going to happen at the end of the story. There are a couple hints along the way specifically plugged in for the reader to figure out a certain mystery that I will not spoil. um and you provide some clues to certain things. They're relatively subtle. Is this to let the audience try and solve that mystery? Is it to increase tension? Or so that they know something that the protagonist perhaps doesn't? Or is it both? Is it, hey, let's do everything at once? It makes the story better.
Yeah, I think it's kind of both. I didn't I didn't want to make it I didn't want to make the mystery too apparent so that it pulled too much focus onto itself because I like you sort of just said, it's not a who done it, you know.
Yeah.
It's not, like the Scream movies, as much as they're horror movies, they're also whodunits.
Yeah.
You sit down in the theater and maybe your primary question is who's Ghostface this time, and the whole movie you're wondering who it is. I didn't want this book to be like that, but there is a sense that there's menace nearby or approaching from far away and getting closer with each page. And I kind of wanted to keep the reader a little off balance, I guess, because this isn't a story is where someone in this room did it. I just didn't want that kind of vibe to be happening at all. So yeah, I wanted, didn't want it to be such a big deal, the not knowing
Right.
who or what this one element we're trying to dance around.
The antagonistic force, let's say.
Yeah, I didn't want it to be a big deal whether or not that was figured out. So the way I see it is if the reader guesses this one aspect, is totally fine with me. If they don't and it comes as a surprise at the end, that's really cool also.
Yeah.
Um, so I, just tried to find a balance between subtlety and obviousness. I didn't want it to be obvious that I'm hiding something. I didn't want it to be too hidden that I was kind of like subtly pointing at something. So, so yeah, not a very satisfactory answer, but
It's
I,
fine.
I kind of just had a. I
It's
think
by
I
feel,
think
by
it goes
feel.
this way.
Is it just more like, hey, you can kind of, I don't know. A lot of times I'm writing, it's just like I can't. It's hard to say. Oh yeah, I needed to give 3 clues along the way. No, it's like I gave enough. Whatever enough means. It's
Right,
not
right.
a. It's the you can't give a number, or you can't like, oh yeah, the right answer is to do this. It's all for what the stories feel. What the feel is for that particular question, that particular mystery. And I don't think. I mean, I'll brag and say I figured it out, but uh, I still loved it. I still was like, oh, I mean, it did. To me, it increased that that dramatic irony, like that tension of like, oh no, oh no, oh no, that's
Yeah,
not good.
I agree, and that's another way to look at it. I think if someone did guess this one thing and had that oh no, and then it turns out not to be that person, but it's something else equally cool, perhaps.
Right, adjacent.
There's a real value to that. If it does end up being that, then they got to experience that and they don't have it taken away from them. It kind of feels like a win-win as long as the reader doesn't feel cheated in any way and as long as it fits narratively and I'm not shoehorning something in.
Right. Yeah.
So, I don't know. It's one aspect of the book I felt like I was able to have a pretty relaxed perspective on because I just felt like it was going to be fine no matter how I did it.
Yeah, I mean it works. I'm again, I'm not. I'm honestly impressed. Like, if this book, like you said, it's like a complex machine, and the fact that it all fits together and works so well is very impressive to me. Um, uh, we're running out of time for this segment. I could probably ask you questions, a million questions about found footage and form and stuff like that. But everyone should go read October Film Hunt. You should go get it. You should go read it, and then once you read it and listen to this discussion, you'll know what we're dancing around. You'll know immediately, like, oh, that's what they're talking about. Are you ready for the second act?
Absolutely.
That's the right answer. These are broader questions, mostly bookish questions. We're going to start with a question from my last guest, who was Tanya Pell. And her question for you is, what was your gateway horror media? What got you into horror?
The first horror I'm pretty sure the first horror I ever experienced was, and I hope I didn't experience anything before this, was watching The Exorcist when I was 7, and I don't remember how it came to be. My mom doesn't really remember either. All she'll really say is that I watched it and she kept a close eye on me for several days, and I never had a nightmare. It didn't bother me. I didn't have trouble going to sleep. I didn't cry. And I was really interested in it, and I wanted to watch, something else. And not too long after that, I don't remember how long, I watched A Nightmare on Elm Street. I became obsessed with Freddy Krueger. So movies were my gateway. And then when I was 8 or 9, I read Carrie by Stephen King. It's a short book. I was like, oh, I can read that. And then most of it went over my head, of course. Yeah, I was prepubescent by several years. So, um, but yeah, that began my status as a constant reader,
Right. Yeah.
capital C, capital R, like Stephen King calls us. And so, yeah, pretty typical gateways, but I just for my early childhood, I was kind of obsessed with scary things, and weirdly actually kind of moved away from horror for a while in my late teens and 20s, but I knew I would always come back to it, and I did. So,
I mean, they're iconic for a reason.
yes.
Exorcist, Carrie, Nightmare on Elm Street. They're all memorable. And it's a different era. Pre-internet, you're not, or like early internet even. It's like there's not, you don't get to, I was talking about Stephen King with non-horror fans who were just happened to talk to me, and I was selling my books, and and they were asked about Stephen King. I'm like, well, of course he's obviously influential to me. Like, I think most horror writers, it's impossible for him not to have touched us in some way.
Yeah.
And it's like, for a while there, like, I grew up in the middle of nowhere. We didn't have a bookstore in nearby. We had a little library 20 minutes away. Like, there was no other horror really. It's like him and Dean Koontz. Like, those are my choices. So it's meaningful. Yeah.
Mm.
And Carrie's still a great book. It's
Yeah.
still really good. And has the same kind of found media, the newspaper articles and stuff in it too. I will come back to you for a question for our next guest in, I don't know, a few minutes. So you can ponder something. It can be a question about anything. In the meantime, who's a writer more people should be reading?
Hmm.
And you can give me multiple answers if you have them.
Yeah, my first instinct is to think of somebody I don't see mentioned on social media. Like, oh no, I'm bringing up social media again. But that is the modern day campfire.
Yeah.
That's the modern grapevine. Um, I think there's a British writer named Reggie Oliver, who is pretty well known, but only in the weird fiction sort of circles. And I think outside of those circles, he's virtually unknown. But he primarily writes short stories. He, I kind of think of him as the UK John Langan,
Okay.
because each of them publishes a lot of collections. And but Reggie Oliver is a little bit more immersed in the UK brand of quiet, weird, disturbing stories that lean into horror but don't always lean all the way.
Okay.
Uh, he's a you know he's from the M.R. James school, kind of,
Right. Okay.
ghost stories, strange stories, some definite Robert Aikman influence going on too. He has several collections to choose from. I think I can see them over there on my shelf. I can see, I think, 10 Reggie Oliver collections. So there's a lot to choose from. But
Okay.
he writes a lot of stories that take place in the theater, like the stage theater,
Okay.
because he used to work in that world. He used to be an actor, and a lot of stories that take place at like um, English prep schools, like an Eton type of environment. Just a lot of stories that are just unclassifiable. They're just very, very strange. A lot of stories that take place in the distant past, like the 1300s, the 1500s, the 1600s. And I don't get to read a lot of collections the last few years because I kind of have to keep myself in a novel mindset. And if I read many short stories, I'll just want to write them because I love them so much. So, but like John Langan, Reggie Oliver, Brian Evanson, those are some of the only writers where I have to get their new collection.
Right.
I have to, and I'll probably cave and read at least some of the book. But I feel like he's pretty unknown, and I would definitely throw out a recommendation for him. If I had to pick one single collection, probably Flowers of the Sea. Although I think a lot of people like Mrs. Midnight more, but Flowers of the title story from Flowers of the Sea is one of my 10 or so favorite stories from any genre. So,
Okay. Well, I will post a link to that in the show notes, and then I am gonna go buy it. uh, let's see. What's the best piece of advice you followed?
um, I mean, a purely, uh, I don't know. I've gotten a lot of advice, but I feel like there's so much advice I didn't get that I wish I had. Um, Probably someone told me once, back before I even wrote a novel, and I really drew on this mindset when I was writing a novel and editing the novel and starting a second novel and when promoting the first novel and when life really started to become just wildly busy. Um, Someone told me once to always take some time for myself to decompress. And this was someone who had a, demanding day job. I have a demanding day job. And they also had ambitions to be a pretty productive, relatively prolific writer in the mainstream world because they wanted to maximize their writing, which is, how I look at it for myself. But just always take time for yourself, always focus on time management and try to segment everything as constructively as I can, or I'll go insane. And it's it's not a very inspiring piece of advice, but I just feel like it's been really valuable because it is. I have so much admiration for people out there who, single mothers who have two jobs, three jobs, uh, just there's so many people out there who have to work multiple jobs because they're a victim of the way things are, uh, our late stage capitalistic society, so to speak.
Yeah.
And it's really difficult to have 2 jobs, but I take my writing career very seriously, and I treat it 100% like a job, and it demands a job level of an emotional and time investment. It's far more than a hobby, so I have to really work hard to juggle everything and make sure that I don't have a burnout or a breakdown or, get overcome with stress. And so, yeah, like the practical advice tends to be like deeply important to me because, life is harder than uh, finding a way around a problem in a book.
Right. Yeah.
If,
I mean,
if
I'm 1000% practical advice is that's what I'm looking for. I
yeah,
don't want, there you look at, I don't know, I get fed up with a lot of writing books where they're like, "Oh, find the magic." I'm like, "Man, I got to find an hour today." Like I don't I can find the magic. I
yeah,
The magic doesn't come on a schedule. I have to I got four hats somewhere in a day. I can't the magic's not there. I'm real
yeah.
tired.
One way I took that advice and kind of spun off my own piece of advice would be I've told a lot of younger, newer writers over the years, because I've been doing this for a little more than like 13 years, I guess. Yeah, 13 years now. Um, a lot of people focus on word count, like I'm gonna write, or sorry, they focus more on time. I'm gonna write for this amount of time every day, and in my opinion, that can get really stressful. That's what I used to do when the first few years I was writing stories. And especially when I moved on to that practice novel I mentioned earlier, I was like, I'm gonna write this novel and see what happens. I have no idea what I'm doing. And what I found worked for me is I stopped using a block of time per day and I just focused on a number of words per day. And it could be different for other people listening to this or watching this, but it took a lot of the pressure off of me, and I can't express how much of the stress kind of dissipated because I had a modest goal, just like 500 words. It's like just write 500 words today, and as I went forward with that mindset, and I would find myself hitting 500 words and 40 minutes or maybe 50 minutes or maybe it would take over an hour, but some days it would take 30 minutes or even 20 minutes because I would like very quickly get into that zone
Right.
because I wasn't thinking about the clock anymore. And if you add up 500 over the course of several months, you can write a novel. So
Right.
it's not a small number of words. So my personal advice is set yourself a word count every day and don't worry about setting yourself a chunk of time because a ticking clock is always going to get in the way of creativity. So,
I mean, this is precisely why I started this podcast. Um, let's see. That's another question. I'll do one more. What was the last book you read that evoked a visceral physical reaction from you?
hmm,
Or story, you know.
right. There's so many stories, but none of them are recent. Uh, I read a couple of months ago. I read it's more thriller than horror, but a book by S.P. Miskowski
Okay.
called "If You Knew Me." It uh, I would call it a literary thriller. I know, like, putting the word literary in front of a genre or subgenre can either seem pretentious or it can put people off, but it's just a thriller novel that cares about the prose, you
Right.
know? That's really all I'm saying, and it makes you think a little bit more than you might otherwise. And it gave me a visceral reaction because I told SP, and even though it was too late to write a blurb that could appear in the book, like printed in the book, I still wrote up a little blurb for her and gave it to her because I know her because she does often write horror. She's very good. But this was my second time reading one of her thrillers, and the antagonist in it is a woman named Anne, and she was so unique to me. She is so messed up, but in a I don't wanna give it I don't this if I said what I was gonna say, it wouldn't be a spoiler, but it would be sort of a conceptual spoiler.
Okay.
It would be like a mood-related spoiler.
Okay.
She's just she was a really fascinating villain, and just getting to crawl inside of her head and experience the world the way she did. I've read some really creepy, disturbing characters in my life, but Anne was up there, and I she was up there in a way that I hadn't really experienced before.
Okay.
So, fairly routine thriller plot. Would be an aspiring journalist finds a pitch letter from this woman buried in her aunt's paperwork because her aunt owns a news magazine, and she's just really intrigued by it. So she reaches out to the woman because this long, like rambling pitch letter sort of confesses to a crime. And so she tries to set up an interview with this woman, and then a cat and mouse sort of game ensues from there.
Okay.
You do get a lot of narrative and dialogue and found materials from Anne from her perspective, and it's just like she really made my skin crawl. So that,
Okay.
that'll
I mean,
be
I'm stop digging. You hit oil. I'll put another link in another book I'm gonna buy and eventually read, hopefully. Um, do you have a question for our next guest?
hmm. Since this is a podcast that digs a little more into the act of writing itself, I want a question that has something like that.
Okay.
Um, what has been your one daily practice that helps keep your writing momentum going, or
That's
your
good.
your creative spark going in a forward motion that we all need to consistently produce our art?
Excellent. That's a good question.
So I think some people would have like a superstitious sort of thing. Some people would have a very practical,
Yeah.
lock myself in a room and tell everybody to stay away, whatever,
Yeah.
it could be.
That might question might join the list. The perpetual list. We'll see. It might. I try and cycle things. I don't want to keep the same questions forever. Try
Right.
and cycle things through. Okay, so that's it for the second act. We can move on to our final segment, which is it's time for blood. It's time for pain. It's time for struggle. Which is could be anything about a current work in progress, something about October Film Hunt, could be about something in the past, could be about business, could be philosophical, could be anything. What do you have anything that comes to mind?
So something I've struggled with. Hmm. I guess I'll open up a little bit and talk about the my second novel, which I have written and is now in edits, and those edits are due in about a month, and then I'll take a very long nap because the lead up to the publication of the October Film Hunt, all the promotion, all the podcasts, all the various things I've been doing. I've also been working on this second book, and then on top of my day job.
Yes.
And so one of the things about me as a writer is, and we kind of touched on this way back at the beginning, is if I were left to my own devices, I would write really, really weird stuff. Just,
Right.
like, super weird. Like, I would take it's like, I'm gonna write a werewolf novel, but I would do it in a really, really weird way, just as one example. My next book is not about werewolves, but, um, so that's kinda my default state. I've always loved reading weird fiction, and my ultimate comfort zone is in that part of the Venn diagram where weird fiction and horror intersect, which, a lot of people just call weird horror. And that's my favorite of all the things. Um, when a writer enters the more mainstream part of the industry, especially when you're talking about the big five publishers, which the October Film Hunt was published by a big five imprint, St. Martin's. Like I mentioned earlier, you have all these rules and guidelines that you think you're supposed to follow, and I think I wanted to break some of those rules with the October Film Hunt, and I think I did. And, that there's a risk that's inherent there because some people aren't going to connect with it because it's not like other things,
Yeah.
while other people are going to very strongly connect to it because it's not like those other things. And then there'll be people in the middle who like it for their own reasons. Everything's fine, everything's valid. People are welcome to think what they want. But I like weirdness. I like atmospheric, ambiguous. I would make every ending, and maybe not every ending, but I would make most of my endings ambiguous if I could get away with it. I love that stuff. Going all the way back to when I was a teenager and I read Sylvia Plath's The Bell Jar, and the ambiguity of that ending just hit me so hard, and I've never gotten it out of my mind. I think about that book pretty routinely, and I've always kind of been chasing that sort of feeling, and it's kind of been folded into my love for horror. But anyway, let me pull all those tangents back. When I was writing my second novel, I had already written this longer than average, a little more complex than average debut novel, and kind of rolled the dice with that. And so, what was I going to do with the second novel? And I guess I was feeling very uh, sure of myself, very, confident because my second novel was much weirder. It was just I kinda wrote it in a rush because I was on a tight deadline, and there was some life stuff going on that made me have a very late start on it, so I normally would have been much further along as the deadline got closer and closer than I actually ended up being. So, what I ended up with was this extremely weird, just amorphous, just creepy as hell, but kind of uncertain novel. And I was kind of taking another aspect of modern society, almost like a mirror image of what the October Film Hunt looks at, because it also involved the internet, but a different corner of it.
Okay.
And so I wrote this book, sent it to my editor. About three 3 weeks later, she sent it back and she's like, "We need to have a talk about this book."
Oh no.
And I'm not gonna, it's not necessary for me to go into detail. The details aren't what's relevant here. Um, but it was a big reminder for me that I do exist within a mainstream Big Five sort of environment now,
Right.
at least for the near future, because this was a two-book deal, and this was the second of those two books. And there were some things in it that, were just too dark. There were some things in it that were just too oblique and too opaque.
Right.
And so I was pres I pre wrote myself into a situation where I had a huge challenge in front of me. Like, it's almost like I had written the October Film Hunt. I felt so sure of myself as a novelist, but here I was after that having to step back and think, okay, well, who am I as a novelist? What
Right.
do I want out of this? How do I want to move forward with this? What's my compromise going to be? Because, it's not like I only read super weird books. Like, I read Stephen King, I read, uh, you know, the Coffin Moon by Keith Rawson. I read a
Right.
couple months ago. Has its weirdnesses, but it's a pretty straightforward story. I read Paul Tremblay. And I do want to exist within that more approachable, more accessible world. And I had that same mentality when I was writing the October Film Hunt because I wanted any horror fan to be able to pick up that book and enjoy it. I, financially and uh, practically speaking, I can't just write books for the people who love super weird stuff.
Yeah.
It's like the trick and the challenge is to do so on everybody's terms, not just on mine. Like I want to stay true to who I am, but I want to exist within a mainstream market, and I want to write things that those readers will enjoy. So here I was with this, super weird novel, and it was such a strange feeling because I didn't really understand how I had gotten there. It's hard to describe. I was like, why did I how did I write this book? This is a really weird book. Like weirder than the October Film Hunt for sure. So, I basically took half of the premise, scrapped the other half. It's like I'm gonna make this I over the course of a few days, thinking and not writing stuff down, but just kind of musing. And it's like I'm gonna make this my blank book.
Right.
Definitely redacting that word.
Right. Right.
Um, and then something just lit up in me. So that was a huge struggle just to get to that moment and all the self-reflection that came after that, looking back and thinking like, what made me write the book this way? What made me kind of veer off this mentality I had while I was writing the October Film Hunt, where kept the I kept the wide, broader mainstream audience in my mind as I was writing because the book was also for them. What made me lose sight of that? Why did I turn more
Inward.
inward and narrow my vision and write a book that would have a smaller audience? And I still haven't fully figured that out, which is fine. Um, but this new premise that I came up with is, much more like what I wanted, much broader, much wider, but still very weird because I never want to fully abandon that.
I mean, you're still writing it. It's still
Right.
you intrinsically. It's still you.
Exactly.
You
So
know.
so I put myself in a position where I had the challenge of rewriting about 2/3 of a novel in a very short period of time, and I did it. I crawled out of the hole of it, like, on fumes, but I did it. I kept my sanity. I'm forming complete sentences right now as we talk,
You're doing great.
and so that would I can't really see myself having a struggle as big as that because I think it was a turning point in my career as a writer. I think I'll look back on it one day as a turning point where I had to self-correct my course and recalibrate my perspective on what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, what my motivations are. who my audience is, you know.
Right.
And I think going forward, I'm always going to have a clearer vision of who I am and why I do what I do and how I do what I do.
Is it
And, you know, just have the wider lens always in place as while I'm conceptualizing and while I'm writing. And, you know, I rewrote the book. Now we're editing it. Everybody's happy with it. And things are going well on that regard. And I think people are definitely going to like this new version of it far more than they would have liked the first one, even if maybe I would have liked the original better. But it's just, yeah, it was just it's too brutal and too, and I think maybe the outside world was affecting me a lot as I was reading it because I was writing it during the election,
yeah.
and I just think there was a lot of ugliness impacting me, and so that's another thing I had to struggle with is how do I reconcile the outside world and
You don't write in a vacuum.
no,
Nobody does. No one writes in a vacuum.
how can I use the strife of the world in my art, but not let it consume my art?
Yeah.
And you know,
Yeah.
it's like weaving. It's like if I were making a quilt, I'm not gonna put, you know, white supremacists in the actual quilt.
Right. Yeah.
I'm gonna, you know, put something pretty that no one but me knows was informed by
Right.
these disgusting white supremacists and the things they're trying to do. And, you know, like maybe this tree would have leaves on it if not for them, but it doesn't now. It's dead. So I don't know.
I mean, it's hard to spin up metaphors on it in a moment's notice.
Yeah, it was a
Uh,
weird example to come up with.
it is everyone's work is influenced by the world and by your on a mood on a day-to-day basis, on, your life situation, all those things. I don't know. Is it like a is that like, I don't know. I don't know if calling it a crisis is accurate, but is it about like finding your identity, finding your place in the broader writing world and in publishing?
Yeah, and part of it was because the October film hunt was still months away, you know, like
Right.
I kept thinking I need the October film hunt to come out and to be out there and being read by people because they're going to help me define myself, which, you know, isn't how it works, of course. But I kept wanting that. It's like, but I can't wait until then to do this. So, like, I have to, it was almost like I was guessing about certain things. And you're like, you know, just there's no need for any of that. Just number one, I have to stay true to myself and my vision. I have certain ways that I like to do things. I have certain passions and certain things that just drive me so emotionally that, you know, I don't ever wanna let go of those things, and it's like some writers say you should never try to write for the market. You should never chase trends. It's like, horror romance is super big right now. I'm gonna write a book like that. I was like, "Mm, yeah, okay, but by the time you write it, it might not be a thing anymore. And
Yeah.
then what are you gonna do?" Um, so just stay true to yourself, write what you wanna write what makes you sing inside, and that's the way you get all that love and into the words, and it's gonna be apparent in the words, and people are gonna pick up on that. And it was almost like I had to relearn that, and it was a really interesting process, but at the same time, I'm pragmatic. You know, you are writing for the marketplace. You shouldn't write for the market, but you also can't ignore the market.
I think it's when you can't ignore. I don't know. Once you engage with capitalism, you can't ignore the fact that, like, when I am publishing a book, I want a cover that will attract an audience. And I'm not, like, and I want it to look good and I want to like it, but it's ultimately like what's going to help sell the book. And at a certain point, it's like a different mindset altogether. And obviously when you're engaging with an editor, like that's a collaborator at a certain point. They are, that's what they're there for. They are there to help shape your ideas.
Mhm.
And it's not to say that you're right and they're wrong, or they're right and you're wrong. It's again, the nature of collaboration in general. And I think there are, coming back to pragmatism, it's a matter of try and get my brain to form these sentences in the right way, in the same way you were struggling with. It's a matter of it's not magic. You're making choices when you write, and when you get feedback from an editor, it's pragmatic. We need this to work like this. We need to do this way. And you go, okay, how can we find, again, you mentioned it, compromise, right? How to find the happy medium. I mean, you feel like, it feels like you're like, whoa, this may be, and that can't make you a better writer, because ultimately you are feeling like I don't know. I like it when I'm stretched, when I push my writing in different directions, either be weirder or this is more quote unquote broader or more approachable. Even though I don't know. I have a feeling that when you describe, oh, the book's gonna be more approachable, like if after reading October Film Hunt, I'm gonna read the next one. I'm probably gonna ask you to be back on the podcast, and I'll probably go, oh, good. You can't be too weird for me. I love weird, so I'm all for it. Like I said, I like when you say you broke some rules with this. I like that. I think the market is. I like it when there is hard books in traditional publishing that are stretching things, because it feels like it opens that window wider for everyone else after you. They
I agree.
can,
It's like comic book movies, superhero movies, action movies over the last 15 years, maybe, all started to kind of feel the same.
yeah,
And, some people say it's because of that book, Save the Cat.
yeah,
Like screenwriters started reading this book and writing all their screenplays to hit these very almost religiously placed plot beats. And so, I'm sure there were other factors as well, but movies started to just feel the same and there was like a homogeneity there. Is that even a word or is it homogeneousness?
I think both are perfectly good.
Okay.
I like them both.
And a lot of I think that there's a risk out there for horror novels, mystery novels, thriller novels, fantasy novels. Maybe fantasy is kind of off in its own world where they can write really big things, but a lot of genre books are kind of at risk of being written the same way because and like the mainstream literary world kind of perpetuates that cycle, and that's what the readers get. That's what the readers expect. That's what the writers write, and it just keeps going around and around and turning itself more and more concrete. And I, I do think that there need to be books that come in from time to time because there are so many more books nowadays. And books need to come in who like that fully deserve a place at the table is like, I'm going to do things a little bit differently. And, I'm going to, once upon a time, nobody wrote first person present tense, which is still such a weird tense and POV when you think about it. Why are you telling me what's happening to you
As it's
right
happening,
right now, like right this
are we
second?
on a phone call? Like, what's going on?
Are you running from a zombie and telling me that you're running from it? It's just
Yeah.
once upon a time that was unthinkable, but now you see it pretty frequently. Um, but yeah, just I I can almost say I had to like just take myself and sit myself down and have a stern talk with myself, and now I know what I'm doing, but it was a struggle to get there, and I'm really grateful for it.
I'm again. I love to hear it from different authors talk, and this is why, this is again why started this podcast. It's really good to hear these. I think people. I think again, it's like a thing where we all can. Everyone listening to this, can relate to having these, like, facing these crises. And it's like a lot of times it's. I was literally talking about this yesterday. It's like we all just project strength. We're all like, "Oh, I'm good. I signed a new deal. I'm publishing a new book." Blah blah blah. I'm like, no, we're all going through it,
Mhm.
especially in reaction to the world and the news and being bombarded by it all the time. I could talk about publishing forever and gripe about it, but we're running out of time. Where can they find you online? Tell people before we go. Where can people find you online? Where they can follow you? Where can they find October Film Hunt?
The October Film Hunt should be
Everywhere.
in pretty much any bookstore. You know, I'm sure there are bookstores out there that don't have it. I'm not trying to say it's in every bookstore, but I went up to upstate New York and Vermont last week, and I think I went in 9 bookstores, and only one of them didn't have it, and it was mostly a used bookstore, so
Ah, there
I
you
let them off the hook for that. Um, yeah, all the online retailers, pretty much any brick and mortar bookstore. So if you have interest in picking it up, I would recommend going to your local bookstore because that's a good way to support your local small businesses. Libraries are good too. A lot of libraries have it. I have a dust covered website at michaelwehunt.com that I occasionally update. I'm trying to actually put podcast links and review links for the new book on there. So I actually have been on the site recently, believe it or not.
go. Okay.
And I'm on the typical social media platforms, either as like just my name or Michael Wehunt author, something like that. And pretty easy to find. I usually just make sure you see a distorted version of my face. That's how you'll know it's me.
Awesome. Uh, Again, hey, go get the October Film Hunt if you haven't yet. If you made it this far and we haven't sold you, go get it. What are you waiting for? Right now. Thank you, Michael. Appreciate you for being on the podcast.
It was great. It was great taking a different angle towards certain aspects of it.